There is a moment that happens to people who grew up in the 1970s, a quiet, disorienting recognition that arrives without warning, usually in the middle of ordinary life. You are watching children today, or sitting in a meeting where everyone seems urgently overwhelmed by things that feel manageable to you, and something clicks into focus. You didn't just grow up in a different decade. You grew up in a different psychological environment, one that no longer exists, and one that shaped you in ways you are only beginning to name. It wasn't better or worse than what came after, but it was profoundly different. The freedom you had as a child wasn't symbolic, it was physical. You left the house in the morning with no phone, no tracking, no itinerary, and the only instruction that mattered was a simple one: be back before the street lights come on. Between the door and the dark, the day was entirely yours. And inside that unscheduled, unsupervised, unhurried space, a nervous system was being built that most of the modern world has never had the chance to develop. You are still carrying that nervous system, and it explains more about you than you might expect. When you were bored as a child, no one rescued you from it. There were no screens waiting to absorb your attention, no curated activities to fill the gap. If you announced that you were bored, the response was brief and final: go find something to do. And so you did. You devoured books, took things apart to see how they worked, disappeared into your own imagination for hours at a time. Boredom wasn't an emergency. It was a signal, a quiet invitation to engage your own mind. Research on unstructured childhood confirms what your nervous system already learned. When children organize their own time without external structure, they develop stronger executive function, the mental architecture responsible for focus, planning, and self-regulation. But something deeper formed beneath that. You learned that purpose didn't arrive from the outside. It emerged from your own initiative. When nothing was given, you created something. Many adults today feel strangely hollow in their quiet moments, not because their lives lack richness, but because they were never asked to sit with open space long enough for desire to emerge on its own. You were. That training is still inside you. You didn't learn about danger from warning labels. You learned it by living inside your body. You climbed trees that were too high, rode bikes without helmets, played near creeks and construction sites with a confidence that would alarm most people today. And sometimes things went wrong. You fell. You got cut. You broke something and figured out what to do about it. Each time, your nervous system registered the same quiet lesson: this hurts, but it isn't catastrophic. Developmental psychology calls this accurate threat assessment, the ability to distinguish between real danger and manageable risk, not through imagination or instruction, but through direct experience. Your amygdala wasn't trained on hypothetical harm, it was calibrated by actual consequence. Over time, your baseline anxiety lowered, not because you were reckless, but because your nervous system became realistic. This is why chaos doesn't scramble you the way it rattles others. When a situation turns tense, your body doesn't shift into panic. It shifts into assessment, scanning what's actually happening rather than catastrophizing what might. Pain for you was never proof of failure. It was information. And that is why, when things fall apart, your first instinct isn't to dramatize the problem, it's to stabilize the situation. Movement is the regulation. You learned this long before anyone gave it a name. If any part of this is landing for you, take a moment to drop a like on the video. It helps more people find conversations like this one. And if you're drawn to the deeper psychology behind human behavior, consider subscribing. It's the best way to stay connected to this work. You also learned how to be alone, before being alone became something to fear. Long stretches of your childhood were quiet by any modern standard. You spent hours in your room listening to an album from beginning to end. You lay in the grass with friends without anything to look at except the sky. You walked alone with your thoughts, not because you were lonely, but because there was nothing demanding that you escape yourself. Psychologists call this comfortable solitude, the capacity to remain present with your own inner experience, without immediately reaching for distraction or noise. Studies on pre-digital childhood consistently show that people who grew up without constant connectivity experience significantly less anxiety, when left alone with their thoughts. Their nervous systems don't interpret silence as a problem. Modern life teaches the opposite. Silence now feels suspicious, and empty moments are filled before they have a chance to deepen into anything. Connection for you is real and chosen. It isn't used as anesthesia. Waiting was built into the fabric of your childhood in ways that quietly rewired your relationship with reward. If you wanted to watch your favorite show, you waited a week. If you took photographs, you waited days to discover whether they had even turned out. If you wanted to talk to someone, you called the house and hoped they were home. Nothing arrived instantly, and that wasn't considered deprivation. It was simply how things worked. Research on delayed gratification shows that people who grow up waiting develop stronger impulse control and more stable satisfaction over time. When gratification is delayed, dopamine builds gradually through anticipation, effort, and follow-through. Anticipation became part of enjoyment, not an obstacle to it. Modern systems train the opposite. Instant reward floods the brain, then vanishes just as fast, teaching dissatisfaction by design. Your nervous system was wired differently. You learned that the interval between desire and fulfillment didn't diminish what arrived. It often deepened it. Patience for you isn't passive. It's a skill one that allows depth and commitment in a world that keeps trying to rush past both. By the time you were 8 or 9, you were already managing a level of independence that would concern most people today. You navigated neighborhoods, woods, and unfamiliar places using judgment and intuition alone. When something went wrong, you absorbed the consequence. No one was waiting to intervene. Psychologically, this builds what researchers call an internal locus of control, the deeply held sense that your choices matter, that your decisions are genuinely yours, that the self is the most reliable instrument you have. That experience wired a self-direction most people spend their adult lives trying to manufacture. But it carried a hidden cost. Children trusted to manage themselves early, learned to contain emotions as well as behavior. You didn't just solve problems, you handled them quietly, independently, without narrating the difficulty. That builds remarkable competence. It also quietly teaches you that vulnerability is unnecessary, that asking for help is optional, that the self is most reliable when it stands alone. Unsupervised autonomy makes you capable, resilient, and self-directed. It also taught you to carry more than you ever needed to carry alone. There is a quiet discomfort many people from your generation carry, but rarely name. The world feels louder, faster, and more performative than your nervous system was built to process constant updates, constant explanation, constant emotional broadcasting. Something in you keeps thinking, why does everything need so much noise? This isn't resistance, it's a mismatch. Your nervous system was shaped in an environment where attention was stable, autonomy was expected, and competence was demonstrated quietly. Today's world rewards visibility, immediacy, and continuous self-expression. When you hesitate to overshare, it reads as distance. When you pause before reacting, it registers as disengagement. But these aren't deficits. They are adaptations to a different developmental environment, one calibrated for depth over speed and substance over signal. That world is gone. It isn't coming back in the same form. But the wiring it gave you still matters. The work now isn't to abandon what that childhood built. It's to integrate it, to carry forward the self-trust and resilience it gave you, while allowing yourself the connection, support, and emotional range you were never particularly encouraged to have back then. You don't need to become louder or faster to belong here. You were built for something the modern world is quietly running out of. Hold on to that, and let a little more in. Thank you for watching.